Okay, is everybody ready? Good morning. The state of Iowa has been working closely with local governments in monitoring the flooding, and we stand ready to provide additional assistance to local governments, and we're continuing to work with the communities downstream on preparation for the flooding. This morning, I signed a proclamation of disaster emergency, which adds additional counties, including Saragordo, Hancock, Mitchell, and Worth counties to the 13 that we had previously to provide state resources for flooding response. These 4 counties, of course, join the 13 that were declared on Friday. Those include Allamakee, Benton, Blackhawk, Bremer, Buchanan, Butler, Cedar, Chickasaw, Delaware, Floyd, Franklin, Lynn, and Wright. And we have, at the request of the county treasurer in Lynn County, because they have had to evacuate the treasurer's office, extended the property tax deadline for a month in Lynn County. And that was done in response to the request from the Lynn County treasurer. In addition to allowing state resources to be used for response, the proclamations also activate Iowa Individual Assistance Program that provides grants up to $5,000 for households with incomes up to 200% of the current federal poverty level. The grant application and instructions are available on the Iowa Department of Human Services website. I had an opportunity to see the damage caused by the floods on Saturday when I and Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds, Homeland Security Emergency Management Director Mark Scouten, and Iowa National Guard Adjutant General Tim Orr toured 3 communities that have been or are preparing to be impacted by the flooding. I would say we were also joined by both of our United States senators, the 2 congressmen whose districts were affected, and local legislators as well. Senators and representatives of both parties joined us to view the damage. And we're very appreciative of the cooperation we've gotten from the federal delegation and also from the members of the legislature. I also know that many legislators and legislative candidates have volunteered and have been involved in sandbagging and assisting in their districts. The state continues to assist the impacted communities in their response to the flooding and to help prepare for the anticipated flooding in the days ahead. Later today, more than 300 members of the Iowa National Guard, along with 53 members of the Iowa State Patrol, will begin to assist the city of Cedar Rapids with access control for the evacuated areas. The Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management is continuing to coordinate the delivery of state resources to the affected communities. And we have reassured the local government leaders when we've been there that we stand ready and willing to help with additional things that may come up. Resources that have been provided include more than 180,000 sandbags, 4 dump truck loads of sand, 27 water pumps and hoses, 63 pallets of flood barriers equal to 4,320 lineal feet, 50 traffic barricades, assistance to local law enforcement, 7 members of Iowa's incident management team to assist with response operations in Lynn County, 680 flood cleanup kits, 10 dump trucks, 1 communications trailer, 1 portable shower trailer unit, 3 pallets of bottled water. Plus, I just say there's been a tremendous response from individual businesses, contractors. I saw some of the equipment that was being used in Cedar Rapids to fill the HESCO barriers with sand, and they were working very diligently and have continued to. And also, I talked to the president, the national president of the Red Cross. The Red Cross has been there, as well as the Salvation Army and others. So we will continue to work with the communities over the next few days, providing equipment, personnel, technical assistance as the river's crest continues as it goes downstream. Now I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds to tell you more about where we are headed today after this press conference. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor Branstad. And as Governor Branstad indicated, Saturday we did have the opportunity to visit 3 communities that have been impacted by the flood, and we're preparing for more impacts from the flooding as it continues to impact downstream. The damage was severe, but it was important for us to be there on the ground and to see for ourselves and to have the opportunity to talk to those that were impacted by the flood waters. I certainly, again, was humbled by the Iowa spirit that was on display, the neighbor helping neighbor attitude, the cooperation and collaboration of so many people, from our state agencies to local government to private sector to family members who received a phone call and said, come in, I need help clearing out the basement. It certainly was just, again, a reminder of how resilient Iowans are and how we step up and take care of when things need to be done. Again, today, we feel it's necessary to get back to flood damage areas and let the citizens know that the state of Iowa continues to stand with them and will continue to provide whatever support that we can. That includes an assessment in the days ahead to determine if a presidential proclamation is warranted. I think they indicated they'll be on the ground tomorrow in the recovery efforts, especially in the 3 communities that we were just in. Director Scouten, he will be able to discuss the process of requesting a presidential proclamation if you would require more information on what that process looks like. Right after this press conference, I, along with Governor Branstad, or General Orr, Director Scouten, we will accompany Governor Branstad on another tour to see the damage and preparations in several communities that continue to take place. First, we'll be traveling to Charles City, and we'll be there from 12:30 to 1:30. We'll be at the City Hall, which is 105 Milwaukee Street, to meet with local officials, and then we will be visiting 2 sites that have been damaged by the impact. After Charles City, we'll be heading to Greene, and we'll be there from 2 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And we'll first visit the City Hall and the Community Center at 202 West South Street. Greene was especially hit hard last week. I know last week we headed over to Cedar Rapids, but Congressman King was able to go up there and visit Greene, and so we'll be in their community today to take a look at the impact. People in Charles City and Greene are in recovery mode now that the waters have crested and are now receding. And so, again, we just want to be there and let them know that we want to do whatever we can to be supportive and help in the recovery efforts as other communities are continuing to put the procedures in place to impact as the floods move further downstream. And I think we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point.
Okay, are there questions? Yes, Kay?
How many miles of roadway are affected? There was a road that was washed out by a whole line, I know. At one point, 60 roads were closed in one of the affected.
Yeah, so I don't have that assessment number yet. A lot of those are local roads. At the state level, we've just had impact mostly in the shoulders and other things, and as the water recedes, we'll start to see what that impact is.
I would say we first saw firsthand in Butler County considerable damage, and we expect as the assessments come in that there will be, especially county roads and farm to market roads in particular, that are facing considerable damage. And all of that will go into whether or not we will have met the threshold to request a presidential disaster designation. Mark, you may want to respond to that.
Governor, I might say that our folks are heading up to northeast Iowa right now to the northern counties. They'll be working with the local emergency managers, the county engineers, to determine just that. What has been the secondary road damage? All those figures will go into a joint preliminary damage assessment. That will be presented to FEMA through its Region 7 administrator. And if the total dollar value of the damage exceeds the threshold for the state of Iowa, which is 4.3 million, then the governor will make a formal request for a presidential disaster declaration so that we can receive additional FEMA funding for those damages sustained in these 17 counties to date.
You know, we saw water over the road in Clarksville. We also heard from State Representative Pat Grassley about getting in and out of Shell Rock. Unfortunately, they didn't have to close a bridge, a new bridge that was built in Shell Rock in 2011. It came very close, but they didn't have to close that. And had they had to close that, that would have, because that was about the only route through that area because all the rest of the roads were closed. So fortunately, the water is starting to recede in that area.
Question for Director Trombino. Are any of the interstate highways in jeopardy? I know there's been concern, a lot of talk in Cedar Rapids. Will 380 be closed? Will I-80 remain open? Will I-35? All of these major port transportation corridors remain open.
Yep. So so 380, we feel comfortable with. There are some ramp impacts and some other things at this point. But as the river moves, the flow moves south, Interstate 80 is what we're monitoring right now. We have had some impacts there in the past, and we won't know probably till first thing Wednesday morning because it seems like the flow slowed down a little bit, but the flow is also dropping. So that's good news. So I won't have that answer, but it's one of the areas that we're going to monitor as we go forward.
And that is where the Cedar River crosses.
Correct.
Cedar County.
It's Cedar. Yeah.
Cedar County. Didn't you just rebuild that bridge here a couple years ago too?
Yeah, the bridge is not. Yep, the bridge is not the issue. The water tends to, a lot of these areas, 151.13 is another area where the water tends to move into the ditches along the sides of the routes and then will creep into the roadway. So the bridge is not of concern. It's the water that as it moves up and then it ends to get into the shoulders and potentially into the lane.
So you're monitoring I-80. 380 is definitely going to stay open.
380 we feel comfortable with, yeah, because the water's starting to move
Okay,
as
you're
we move past.
monitoring 80.
Everything to the south is our biggest issue.
It's possible it might close, I-80 might close on Wednesday.
It's possible we'll make that decision, probably early Wednesday morning, the way the flows are right now.
As we came down 380 Avenue of the Saints on Friday, it was okay. Although at Cedar Falls, I think we saw there was some flooding and there was some roads closed there. Yes. So we could see that as we came through that area. But 380 itself was open and it sounds like that's going to continue to be.
Governor, the general has a comment.
Yeah. General.
I'd like to go back to the question in reference to the infrastructure and specifically the roadway that you asked. One of the things we did Saturday, which we weren't able to do in 2008, and it's a great asset, is our Air Guard has an aircraft called the RC-26. And while we, the group of us, the governor, lieutenant governor, Director Scout, and I were in the process of seeing the damage areas, we were flying from the actual Mississippi River north all the way up to that basin, capturing video of all that flood damage to include the Cedar and also the Shell Rock. So that's very valuable information for us to use on the initial assessment as we begin to share that with the other directorates here so we can begin to see that damage before folks can actually get into it.
Other questions?
Any sense at this point how close you are to 4.3 million threshold?
Little
Mark?
early to say.
Yeah.
It would be premature to say. We are seeing a lot of damages out there. We will be working diligently with the local emergency managers to calculate all of it.
So it's pretty likely that you're going to request a presidential declaration, at least some counties.
I think it's likely. We've already made that request from the earlier flooding that occurred more than a month ago in northeast Iowa, in Winneshiek and Chickasaw and some of those counties. So, and I think this is significantly worse than that. But I will give Mark Scouten and the, Homeland Security Emergency Management staff credit for being very careful and very meticulous at getting all the information and records before we make a request. And because of that, we've been pretty successful in getting those disaster requests approved. So we're going to go about that in a very same cautious, careful, diligent way. But from what we've seen, I think it's very likely.
And that will provide what, additional money?
Well, that will open up federal matching dollars. And Mark, you can give them the details of what happens with that.
You know, if we would be successful in getting a presidential declaration, it would open up money for public infrastructure. We'd also make a request for federal individual assistance for homeowners. That would depend upon whether the amount of personal homeowner damage is high enough to warrant a federal individual assistance declaration, but it could also open up SBA loans, CDBG funding. There's a good deal of sources available. It all depends on that initial determination and triggering of the presidential declaration. That remains.
In relation to that, you know, there's a lot of concern on the Iowa level that people in Washington just aren't aware of how bad the flood situation is in Cedar Rapids. Is it possible? Are you thinking about asking Obama to come here and actually see Cedar Rapids and show him what actually is happening in terms of flood damage and how much Cedar Rapids actually needs flood control money?
Well, first of all, our congressional delegation, I think, is working very diligently on that. I mentioned both the senators, Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst joined us. Senator Ernst was with us in Cedar Rapids. Senator Grassley was with us on earlier stops. I actually had a grandson that got married on Saturday night, so he wasn't able to stay with us for the whole thing. But and Congressman Blum joined us as well in Cedar Rapids. So our delegation is working very diligently on informing the president and the other members of the Congress about how important this is. The state has already provided funding, and we have we're a pay-as-you-go state, and so what we have is using sales tax, incremental funding from the growth in sales tax in the counties that are affected, and I think Cedar Rapids has been approved for like $65 million, something like that, in funding from that state program that was established. It has been approved by the Corps of Engineers, and I think by the Congress. It's just the funding that has not been provided as of yet. But we would hope that in light of this situation, it would become evident and clear that this kind of a permanent solution makes sense. I want to also give the federal government credit for the assistance that they have provided after the 2008 flood. We just recently were in Iowa City at the rebuilt Hansher, and obviously we went through a little tussle with the federal IG, but we did get the funding, and they've rebuilt Hansher, and they're rebuilding a lot of the other that have been flooded. Also, the buyout program, we heard from the mayor and the community leaders in Shell Rock, 20 homes that would have been flooded again. But we're because of that buyout program, those were bought out last time. There are still 5 homes that were badly flooded and other basements in Shell Rock, but the situation could have been a lot worse. But I want to give credit for the mitigation work that's gone on and the collaboration we've seen between federal and state and local people in dealing with those issues. And the other thing about this one, it's different than 2008. We're dealing with the Cedar River Basin. The Iowa River is not the threat that it was then. In Coralville Reservoir and well, even here you can see the Saylorville reservoirs are not full, and so we don't have the danger of those downstream from those reservoirs that we had in 2008.
correct to say that you're not planning to invite Obama here to look?
Well, no, I mean, if the president wants to come, he's always welcome. And, we know the president, so far be it from me. I would always say that anytime you have a disaster situation, I learned a long time ago as governor, if you have a disaster in your state, try to get there as soon as you can, reassure people, provide the assistance that's needed. And that, like, when you have a major disaster, it's certainly, I think, wise for the president of the United States to come. So the president's always welcome to come and view any kind of situation like that. And we'd certainly welcome him if he chooses to put that on his schedule.
Governor, what are the lessons that we learned from 2008 that help us better prepare for this flood this time?
Well, there's a lot of lessons, I think, that have been learned. The communities are much better prepared. We have much better monitoring. The flood center in Iowa City has a monitoring of the water levels along the rivers and streams in Iowa. That information is very helpful in planning. And we saw this firsthand on Saturday in Cedar Rapids, whereas I think there was an underestimation of the magnitude of the flooding that was coming in 2008. This time, if anything, we've overestimated. And so we've got HESCO barriers, I think they were anticipating 25-foot crest, and now it's 23 and a half, or even 23, I think I heard this morning. So it keeps going down. A lot of it depends upon if we can just go through the next several days without more rain. So we thank the good Lord we haven't had more rain. And that is helpful because in 2008, and we had that in 93 as well, we just kept getting more and more rain, and that just exacerbated the situation.
What are you hearing from the
Well, the present forecast is pretty good. And that means we're not anticipating significant rain in the near future, in the next few days.
Is this a situation where the state, the executive council has the money that can flow, and then later you go through the process of verifying and allocating that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think you've sat in on a lot of those executive council meetings where, and sometimes it's months and even years before these things finally get totally paid out. But our Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management does a very good job of documenting all of this information. And then obviously we're hopeful that if we reach the threshold levels, that we can also then get federal dollars as well. And the state has a match responsibility as part of that. And executive council approves those funds. And basically, I don't think I can ever remember a year when we have not had a disaster of some kind, some small, some of significance, but we try to be ready and willing. And I think we've learned over time and become more effective at dealing with them. And I'm especially proud of the preparation that's going on this time. And hopefully that's going to mitigate the extent of the damages. And all of the volunteers, like we heard up in Shell Rock, the students from Wartburg College that volunteered and came over and helped with sandbagging in Shell Rock. And we see a lot of that. And I see where Cedar Rapids school system is not meeting for the next 3 days. And I would think that we'll see a lot of students as well as community members that are pitching in to help out.
Does that match 90-10, or is that somewhat what's the federal to state match you get the?
On the front, at the work that's being done right now would be 75-25%. FEMA would pay the 75% for these initial emergency protective measures. Then it would switch to the 15 and 10% of local, and then the state match, and the FEMA would pick up the 75% match.
Any hindsight 2020, do you think that state money should have gone to areas like the the Newville market that is in Cedar Rapids?
Well,
Because isn't that floodplain?
you want to,
Yeah, I think as the governor indicated, the Flood Mitigation Board, under a bill signed by the governor, allocated $600 million for flood mitigation throughout the state. And Cedar Rapids was one of the very first applicants, and they've received a grant of, I believe, $265 million paid in the future, paid going forward. But nonetheless, it is for just those sorts of projects. They're waiting for a federal match under the WRDA appropriation, so the completion is still in the works.
I was just going to indicate too, that Senator Ernst has put language in the WRDA bill that would prioritize 3 places across the nation. Louisiana is also addressing floods, severe flooding. And so that would make the 3 communities a priority, and Cedar Rapids was one of those, Senator Ernst and Senator Grassley. So that is in the language, and they're working with the congressional delegation in Congress to have matching language in Congress. So they are working on elevating Cedar Rapids as a potential need for the funding through the WRDA bill.
and I was $200 million short in my estimate. It's instead of 65 million, it's 265 million. But that is a program that the state put together. I appointed the board that oversees that. And, we do things on a pay-as-you-go basis. So that's being done on increment sales tax receipts over time. But that is the state's match because we knew that the federal government was going to be able to do it all.
I guess the broader question though is, should you quit building in a floodplain?
Well, I think people quit building in a floodplain, or they plan for dealing with it. I was just recently at the CRST building in Cedar Rapids, which is built downtown Cedar Rapids, and a big chunk of downtown Cedar Rapids, I guess you'd say, is in the floodplain. But they designed and built that building so that they could withstand a situation like we're going through right now. And I guess this is a good test to see about it. It's a beautiful new building. I was proud to be there for their dedication. The state did provide some help with that as well. And I think they're going to come through this okay.
They're putting parking on the floor, on the bottom level too, which is also helpful.
And if you look since 2008, just the private homeowner buyout program in this area where the flooding has occurred in northeast Iowa, there's been over 2,000 homes that were bought out at a cost of some $90 million. If you look at Cedar Rapids, the work done immediately after the 2008 floods, the number of buildings that were moved out of the floodplain, we'll see in the next few days how that flooding goes, but certainly there were attempts at that time to move important infrastructure out of the floodplain so that repetitive flooding would not happen.
We have time for one more, then we gotta get going to Charles City.
Yeah.
Can I ask a non-flood question? Governor, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there has been significant problems with software, with teachers trying to give tests to these third graders who
Yeah.
are undergoing these remedial
Right.
instruction, and the teachers are saying that they're expressing a lot of frustration, and the kids might not be able to be tested. Are you doing anything about that?
Linda Fannel, who's my Lieutenant Governor, is our education advisor, has kept us informed about that situation. And maybe Linda can answer that question for you. She knows more details about it, but we are aware that there have been problems.
The Department of Education is working very closely to.
Can you,
The Department of Education is working very closely with Iowa school districts and with the provider of the network for testing students in kindergarten through third grade, as well as some older students, to see how they're doing with literacy reading throughout the year. This is for kids who are K-3, this is a test given 3 times a year. It's a brief universal screener to see how they're making progress. The department is fully aware of the problems, working very hard and very fast to see if we can get them addressed before the next screening period, which is in January. So we'll be sure to keep you posted on how that's going.
Quick follow-up, and then we gotta go. Just a clarification, reference 300 National Guard, is that part of the 400 you announced, or is that in addition to the next 7?
No, it's 412 total at the end of the day today for the mission set.
And that compares to what, 4,093?
That's correct.
I'm sorry, 4,000 in 2008.
That's correct. We were, it's a very small, what I would say, number compared to what we had in 2008. And again, it goes back to what the governor was referring to, that we're really focused on one river basin at this stage, and which really narrows what the mission requirements are at this point.
I would say in 1993, we had all 99 counties that were declared, and we had National Guard deployed all over the state of Iowa. So the National Guard is always there and ready, and has always performed admirably whenever we've had a mission like this. It's the first time since 2011 that they've been activated to deal with the flood. But again, I think the collaboration with the local governments in dealing with this has been excellent, and we're going to continue to monitor and do whatever we can. So we're going to get on the road so we can get to Charles City and to Greene, and thank you all for joining us this morning.